The ocean keeps its secrets, sometimes for years, sometimes forever. But on a humid morning in April 2025, as the sun climbed over the coastal waters of Belize, the sea decided to give something back. Mateo Arce had been fishing these waters for 30 years. His weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency as he pulled in his line, expecting the familiar weight of grouper or snapper. Instead, he felt something different, something heavier, more solid. "I thought maybe I caught trash," Mateo would later tell investigators, his voice soft with the memory. "People throw so much into the water these days. But when I pulled it up, what broke the surface wasn't trash, at least not in the conventional sense. Encrusted with coral and barnacles, the object had clearly been underwater for years. Its original shape was barely recognizable beneath the marine growth, a rectangular mass the size of a small book. Mateo cleaned it gently with his knife, scraping away years of accumulation until a gleam of plastic emerged. A camera, an expensive one, waterproof, designed for underwater photography. The kind tourists bring on vacations, hoping to capture paradise in digital permanence. He pried open the back panel, not expecting much. Seawater ruins electronics. Everyone knows that. But inside, protected by rubber seals that had somehow held for over a decade, was an intact memory card. "I didn't think anything would be on it," Mateo said. "It seemed impossible." Impossible things happen sometimes, especially at sea. When investigators later retrieved the memory card, they found 78 photographs and one corrupted video. The earliest images were typical vacation shots, sunsets over the horizon, close-ups of tropical fish, selfies against azure skies. A young couple smiled in every frame. Their names, according to the camera's digital signature, Evan and Marissa Lockwood. The same Evan and Marissa Lockwood who had vanished without a trace from the Ocean Aurora cruise ship on April 14, 2011. The same couple whose disappearance had been labeled a tragic accident by Aurora Cruise Lines. The same newlyweds whose families had been told to accept that sometimes the ocean claims lives without leaving evidence. Except now, there was evidence. And what it revealed would unravel 14 years of corporate lies, expose a conspiracy of silence, and prove what the victims' families had suspected all along. What happened on Deck 9 that night was no accident. It was something far worse. In March 2011, Evan Lockwood was living the American dream. 28 years old with a promising career in software development and a recently purchased condo in Portland, Oregon. His friends described him as reserved but friendly, the type of person who thought carefully before speaking, someone who planned methodically for the future. Evan was the guy who had his retirement account set up at 22, said Michael Reeves, his college roommate and best man. He wouldn't buy a coffee maker without researching it for 3 weeks, which made his whirlwind romance with Marissa Kent all the more surprising. They met at a charity run in October 2010, Evan participating out of obligation to his company's team, Marissa volunteering at the water station. By all accounts, they connected instantly. Within 5 months, they were married in a small ceremony at the Lockwood family home. "It was fast, sure," Evan's mother, Patricia Lockwood, told reporters at the time of their disappearance. "But they were so happy together. When you know, you know." Marissa was 26, a pediatric nurse at Portland Children's Hospital. Colleagues described her as warm, effortlessly making connections with frightened children and worried parents alike. Her friend circle was wide but tight-knit, many dating back to high school. "She was sunshine," said Jenna Michaels, her roommate before the marriage. "Always the first to help anyone, always organizing things, making people feel included." On social media, the couple radiated joy. Their posts showed weekend hikes, cooking projects, renovations to Evan's condo. They seemed perfect together. So perfect that some friends privately wondered if they were moving too quickly. Their honeymoon cruise aboard the Ocean Aurora was Evan's idea. 7 days of luxury through the Caribbean, stopping at islands where they could snorkel, explore, and unwind. The tickets were expensive, nearly $8,000 for a premium suite, but Evan had been saving for years. This would be their first real adventure as husband and wife. The couple boarded in Miami on April 10th, 2011. Their cabin steward, Luis Morales, remembered them vividly 14 years later. "They looked like movie stars," he said, "always smiling, always holding hands. The wife took many pictures, many pictures. But perfection often hides pressure beneath its surface." In the days before departure, Marissa made a phone call to her friend Jenna. The content of that call wouldn't become relevant until years later, when investigators reopened the case. "She sounded off," Jenna recalled in her 2025 statement, "whispering, like she didn't want to be overheard. She said, 'I just need this trip to go well.' When I asked why, she changed the subject." That same week, Marissa's credit card showed a purchase at a Portland pharmacy, pregnancy tests, 3 of them. The results were never publicly known. Also, that week, Evan withdrew $20,000 from his savings account. When questioned later, his bank could provide no information on where that money went. The withdrawal was in cash. Perfect couples rarely exist. Perfect lives are usually carefully curated illusions. What people present to the world, the smiling photos, the hand-holding, the laughter, often masks complicated realities underneath. On their cruise, Evan and Marissa documented everything. Breakfast on their balcony, Marissa doing yoga at sunset, Evan snorkeling near a reef in Jamaica. Each image, carefully composed, each moment selected to show happiness. But in nearly every photo recovered from that camera, something stands out. Evan looks directly at the lens, smiling. Marissa's gaze is always slightly off camera, as if watching something, or someone, just beyond the frame. In behavioral analysis, this is called environmental scanning, a subconscious habit of people who feel unsafe. They constantly check their surroundings, never fully relaxing. The photos from the first 3 days of their cruise show a pattern. Marissa's smile never quite reaches her eyes. What was she afraid of? According to the recovered timeline on April 13th, 2011, their 4th day at sea, Marissa spent the morning at the ship's spa while Evan attended a poker tournament in the casino. They reunited for lunch at the Lido Deck restaurant. A security camera captures them sitting together, Evan speaking animatedly while Marissa nods, her posture stiff. That afternoon, they visited the ship's shopping arcade. Purchases were made. A silver bracelet for her, an expensive watch for him. They took more photos. In these, something changes. Marissa looks directly at the camera for the first time. Her smile seems genuine. Whatever tension existed appeared to dissolve. That evening, they dined at Oceania, the ship's finest restaurant. Their server, Ramon Diaz, later told investigators that they seemed very romantic, very close. They ordered champagne. They toasted to something Diaz couldn't hear. After dinner, they went dancing at the Starlight Lounge on Deck 9. Multiple passengers recalled seeing them there, laughing and moving together beneath colored lights. One woman described them as obviously in love, the kind that makes you jealous. Security footage from the Starlight Lounge shows them dancing at 11:43 p.m. Marissa wears a blue dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. Evan wears dark pants and a white shirt, open at the collar. At 11:58 p.m., they move toward the deck doors, stepping outside where the music is fainter and the Caribbean night envelops them. The security camera follows them to the threshold, then loses sight as they step onto the outer deck. At precisely midnight, something happens to the camera feed. Static. Digital distortion. Then, a gap of 60 seconds. When the footage resumes at 12:01 a.m. on April 14th, the deck is empty. Evan and Marissa Lockwood are never seen again. Every modern cruise ship is covered with security cameras. They monitor hallways, public spaces, restaurants, and entry points. This surveillance network serves multiple purposes: deterring theft, documenting incidents, and, critically, creating a visual record of passenger activity. The Ocean Aurora was equipped with 342 cameras in 2011. Everyone recorded continuously, storing footage on a central server accessible only to security personnel. According to maritime regulations, this footage must be preserved for a minimum of 30 days. In the case of Evan and Marissa Lockwood, however, a single camera, the one monitoring the exterior of Deck 9 near the Starlight Lounge, experienced what the official report called a momentary technical failure. "Equipment malfunction is not uncommon on cruise ships," said Captain Roland Dyer in his initial statement. "Salt air corrodes electronics. Power fluctuations occur. We regret that this particular camera failed during a crucial moment." The timing was certainly unfortunate. 1 minute of missing footage precisely when a couple vanished. What makes this explanation suspicious isn't just the timing, it's what happened afterward. When the Coast Guard requested all security footage as part of their investigation, Aurora Cruise Lines complied immediately, transferring terabytes of data from every operational camera. But for the Deck 9 exterior camera, they provided only selected clips, footage from 11:30 p.m. to 11:58 p.m., and then again from 12:01 a.m. onward. The crucial minute, midnight to 12:01 a.m., was not just missing. According to the ship's technical logs, it had been deliberately overwritten as part of standard data management protocols. Ryan Kessler, who worked as a junior security technician aboard the Ocean Aurora in 2011, provided a different account in 2025. "It wasn't a malfunction," Kessler said, speaking on condition of anonymity until the case was reopened. "The system worked fine. Someone manually interrupted the feed, then deleted that segment later." When asked who had the authority to alter security footage, Kessler's answer was simple: only two people, the head of security and the captain. The missing footage might be dismissed as an unfortunate coincidence if it existed in isolation, but it doesn't. At 12:03 a.m., just 2 minutes after the camera resumed recording, the Ocean Aurora's navigation logs show an unexpected course correction. The ship deviated from its programmed route by 1.3 nautical miles, ostensibly to avoid floating debris. The altered course took the vessel closer to the area where, 14 years later, Matteo Arce would recover Marissa's camera. When investigators examined the ship's black box data, which, like an airplane's flight recorder, documents navigational commands, they discovered something suspicious. The course correction had been manually input. The duty officer, Lieutenant Raymond Herrera, entered precise coordinates that shifted the ship eastward. When questioned in 2025, Herrera claimed he received the order directly from Captain Dyer, who had suddenly appeared on the bridge at approximately 12:02 a.m. The captain said there was debris ahead, Herrera recalled. "I didn't see anything on radar, but you don't question the captain." Dyer wasn't scheduled to be on the bridge that night. According to the official duty roster, he should have been off duty until 6 a.m. These discrepancies form a pattern. A camera fails at precisely midnight, capturing the last known movements of a couple who subsequently vanish. 2 minutes later, the ship's captain, who should be off duty, orders an unexpected course change. The new route takes the vessel through waters where a camera will eventually be found. And when investigators request the footage that might explain what happened during that missing minute, they discover it has been deliberately erased. In the framework of forensic analysis, these aren't coincidences. They're red flags. The technique mirrors cover-up patterns seen in other maritime incidents, the 1998 disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley from a Caribbean cruise, where security footage mysteriously malfunctioned during critical hours, and the 2005 disappearance of George Smith IV during his honeymoon cruise, where blood evidence was quickly cleaned before investigators could properly document it. But perhaps the most damning evidence regarding the Lockwood case wasn't discovered until 2025, when forensic experts analyzed the ship's communication logs. At 12:08 a.m. on April 14, 2011, just 8 minutes after Evan and Marissa were last seen, the Ocean Aurora transmitted an encrypted message to Aurora Cruise Line's corporate headquarters in Miami. The content of that message was never disclosed to investigators. When questioned about it, company representatives claimed it was routine operational communication. Routine communications aren't typically encrypted. 2 hours later, at 2:17 a.m., the ship received an encrypted response. 3 minutes after that, Captain Dyer called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. No record exists of what was discussed at that meeting. No notes were taken. No emails summarized the conversation. It's as if the meeting never happened, except that it did. And what was decided there would shape everything that followed. When people witness something traumatic, their memories typically crystallize. Details become sharper, more vivid. Psychologists call this flashbulb memory, the brain's way of preserving significant moments. Yet when Coast Guard investigators interviewed the crew of the Ocean Aurora about the night of April 13th, 14, they encountered something unusual: collective amnesia. Bartenders who had served Evan and Marissa couldn't recall their drink orders. Waiters who had brought them dinner couldn't remember their table location. Security personnel who had monitored the Starlight Lounge didn't notice when they left. More striking were the contradictions. Some crew members insisted the couple had argued that evening. Others said they seemed blissfully happy. Some recalled Evan drinking heavily. Others swore he remained sober. Some remembered them leaving together. Others thought they departed separately. It was like interviewing people who had been told what to say but couldn't keep their stories straight, said Lieutenant Michael Torres, who led the initial Coast Guard investigation. In 15 years of conducting witness interviews, I'd never seen anything like it. What Torres didn't know then was that the crew had indeed been told what to say and what not to say. Maria Suarez worked as a cabin steward on the Ocean Aurora in 2011. Her assigned section included the Lockwood's suite. When interviewed in 2025, she revealed that all crew members had received explicit instructions following the couple's disappearance. They gathered us in the staff dining room, she recalled. The head of security told us not to speculate to passengers or media. If anyone asked about the missing Americans, we were to say we didn't remember them clearly and refer all questions to management. More troubling was what happened next. They had us sign papers. They called them confidentiality agreements, but they were different from our regular contracts. These said we could be sued personally if we discussed anything about that night. Similar accounts emerged from other former crew members once the case was reopened. Jamal Washington, who worked as a security officer in 2011, described being pulled aside by his supervisor. He told me to forget I ever saw them on Deck 9, Washington said. When I asked why, he just said, "For your own good." Washington was promoted 3 weeks later, receiving a substantial salary increase. The orchestrated silence wasn't limited to verbal accounts. Documentation disappeared as well. When investigators requested the complete crew manifest for April 2011, Aurora Cruise Lines provided a roster that omitted 17 names. These weren't minor positions. They included the night manager for Deck 9, 2 security officers assigned to evening patrol, and a maintenance worker who had been called to the Starlight Lounge shortly after midnight. The company claimed these omissions were clerical errors, yet all 17 employees were transferred to different ships within days of the Lockwood's disappearance. Several subsequently left the cruise industry entirely. One of them, Miguel Ortiz, had worked as an engineer responsible for maintaining the ship's security systems. In 2025, living in retirement in the Philippines, he finally spoke about what he witnessed that night. "I was called to reset the camera system on Deck 9, he said. "When I arrived, there was water on the deck. A lot of water, like someone had used a hose. And 2 security guards were there, but not in uniform. in regular clothes at 1 a.m. That was strange. When Ortiz asked what had happened, he was told there had been a plumbing leak. He saw no evidence of leaking pipes. The camera cabinet was open, he continued. The digital recorder had been removed. I asked about it, and they said the captain had it. Ortiz never saw the recorder again. The next morning, he was informed that he was being transferred to another ship in the fleet. His departure was scheduled for the next port of call, less than 24 hours later. They said it was a promotion, he recalled, but it felt like I was being removed. The systematic silencing of witnesses and altering of records points to a coordinated effort that extended beyond the ship itself. This wasn't the panicked response of individuals covering up a mistake. It was an institutional mechanism activating exactly as designed. Cruise ships operate under a complex web of jurisdictions. The Ocean Aurora was registered in Panama, owned by a corporation based in Liberia, operated by a company headquartered in Miami, and sailing in international waters when the Lockwoods disappeared. This deliberate jurisdictional confusion creates a legal gray area where responsibility becomes diffuse and accountability nearly impossible. When the Lockwood families pressed for answers, they encountered this system firsthand. Their questions were routed through customer relations, then legal departments, then international maritime authorities. Each entity referred them elsewhere, creating a bureaucratic maze that exhausted resources and patience. They weren't just avoiding the truth, said Patricia Lockwood, Evan's mother. They were wearing us down until we stopped asking for it. For most grieving families, it works. The emotional toll becomes unbearable. Financial resources dwindle. Eventually, they accept whatever closure they can find and try to move forward. The Lockwoods might have followed this familiar path if not for one person. Sophie Lockwood, Evan's younger sister. At 21, when her brother disappeared, Sophie was a journalism student at the University of Oregon. Unlike her parents, who eventually accepted the cruise line's explanation that Evan and Marissa had somehow fallen overboard in a tragic accident, Sophie remained skeptical. The math never added up, she said. Two people don't just fall off a ship simultaneously. The railings are over 4 feet high. You'd have to climb over deliberately. Sophie deferred her studies and began investigating independently. She created websites and social media accounts dedicated to the case. She filed Freedom of Information Act requests for Coast Guard records. She tracked down former passengers and crew members, building a network of contacts and a database of inconsistencies. Most people thought she was unable to accept her brother's death. Many, including family friends, suggested therapy to help her move on. But Sophie wasn't delusional. She was methodical, and her persistence would eventually help uncover the truth. But first, there would be one more attempt to close the case permanently, an attempt so calculated in its cruelty that it nearly worked. 3 months after Evan and Marissa Lockwood disappeared, Patricia Lockwood opened her email to find a message she had both hoped for and dreaded. The subject line read, "We're okay." The sender, evanlockwood@edgemail.com. With trembling hands, she clicked it open. "Mom, I know you must be worried sick. I'm sorry for that. I truly am. But I need you to understand that Marissa and I are fine. We've decided to start over somewhere new. We needed to get away from everything and everyone. Please don't look for us. Don't file reports. Don't contact authorities. This was our choice, and we're happy now. I know this is hard to accept, but sometimes people need to disappear to find themselves. That's what we've done. I love you. I always will. But this is goodbye." Evan Patricia read the message 20 times, tears streaming down her face. It answered her prayers. Her son was alive, while simultaneously breaking her heart. He was alive, but he didn't want to be found. She forwarded the email to Sophie, who received it during a meeting with a private investigator she had hired to help with the case. Sophie read it once and said, "This isn't from Evan." The investigator, a former FBI agent named Rachel Donovan, agreed. "Whoever wrote this doesn't know your brother very well." The message contained subtle but significant deviations from Evan's typical writing style. He never used phrases like "worried sick" or "truly am." He always signed family emails with "love you," never the more formal "I love you." And he invariably included personal references, inside jokes, shared memories, family shorthand. More technically, the email metadata revealed troubling information. Though sent from Evan's Gmail address, the originating IP address traced back to a server in Miami, specifically to Aurora Cruise Line's corporate headquarters. When confronted with this information, company representatives claimed it must be a technical anomaly. Perhaps Evan had visited their offices to use their internet connection. Perhaps their system had incorrectly logged the origin point. These explanations ignored basic digital forensics. IP addresses don't randomly misattribute. Corporate networks don't accidentally claim authorship of external emails. Someone within Aurora Cruise Lines had accessed Evan's email account and sent a message designed to end the investigation. The implications were staggering. Not only did someone at the company know enough about the disappearance to want it buried, but they also had access to Evan's personal credentials. How had they obtained his password? The possibilities were disturbing. Perhaps from his personal belongings, left in the cabin. Perhaps from his devices, if they had been recovered. Or perhaps directly from Evan himself before whatever happened on Deck 9 that night. Sophie took the forged email to the FBI, arguing that it constituted wire fraud and identity theft. The Bureau agreed to investigate, but jurisdictional issues immediately arose. The crime had allegedly occurred on a Panamanian-flagged vessel, involving an American victim through a server owned by a Liberian corporation. The investigation stalled in international legal complexities. Meanwhile, the email achieved its likely purpose. Patricia and John Lockwood began to accept that their son might have chosen to disappear. They scaled back their public appeals. They stopped pressing for answers. They tried to respect what they believed was Evan's wish for privacy. Sophie remained unconvinced, but her position became increasingly isolated. Friends suggested she was in denial. Relatives urged her to respect her parents' acceptance. Even her professors at university recommended she return to her studies and process her grief in a healthier way. The forged email accomplished something remarkable. It weaponized hope against the truth. By offering the possibility that Evan was alive, it undermined the search for what really happened to him. This tactic appears in many high-profile disappearance cases. In the 2014 vanishing of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, family members received text messages claiming their loved ones were safe, diverting emotional energy from demanding accountability. After the 2004 disappearance of Maura Murray, emails supposedly from her suggested she had started a new life, cooling investigative efforts. For 3 years, the case of Evan and Marissa Lockwood remained in this limbo. Not officially closed, but effectively suspended. Aurora Cruise Lines moved on, adding new ships to its fleet and marketing increasingly lavish vacation packages. The Ocean Aurora itself was renovated and renamed, emerging as the Ocean Odyssey in 2014 with no visible connection to its troubled past. Sophie graduated but couldn't settle into a career. The unanswered questions about her brother consumed her. She became what many consider a tragic figure, the family member who can't let go, whose grief transforms into obsession. She moved to Miami, taking a job as a freelance photographer that allowed her flexible hours to continue her investigation. She rented an apartment with a view of the port, watching cruise ships come and go, imagining her brother somewhere out there, either by choice or by force. Her breakthrough came in an unexpected form. In 2015, Sophie created a website about her brother's case. She posted timeline reconstructions, witness statements, photos from the cruise, obtained from other passengers, and analyses of the inconsistencies in the official narrative. Most visitors came and went without engaging. But in November 2016, she received a message through the site's contact form. I worked security on the Aurora in 2011. I was there that night. What I saw wasn't an accident or an escape. The company made us sign NDAs, but I can't stay silent anymore. They were taken to Deck B. That's all I'll say for now. The message came from an anonymous email address. Sophie's reply bounced back as undeliverable. But the reference to Deck B was significant. It wasn't a public area of the ship. It was a service level, accessible only to crew, containing storage, maintenance facilities, and staff quarters. Sophie had never heard it mentioned in connection with her brother's disappearance. She began researching the ship's layout, obtaining deck plans through maritime archives and former employees. Deck B contained something unexpected, a small medical facility, larger than the public infirmary on Deck 4, equipped for serious emergencies. According to a former ship's doctor Sophie interviewed, this facility could perform minor surgeries and stabilize critically injured patients until they could be evacuated. This revelation raised disturbing questions. If Evan and Marissa had been taken to Deck B, as the anonymous message suggested, why? Had they been injured? Had they required medical attention? And if so, why didn't the ship's logs reflect any such incident? Sophie's investigation gained momentum. She connected with a network of cruise safety advocates, many of whom had lost family members in maritime incidents. Through these connections, she identified 3 former Ocean Aurora crew members who had worked on Deck B in April 2011. 2 refused to speak with her, citing their confidentiality agreements. The third, Elena Vasquez, agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Miami in January 2017. Vasquez had worked as a medical assistant aboard the Ocean Aurora. Initially reluctant to discuss specifics, she eventually confirmed that something unusual had occurred around midnight on April 14, 2011. I was called to prepare the surgical suite, she said. It was unusual. We rarely used it at night except for real emergencies. When I asked what was happening, they told me there had been an accident on Deck 9. Vasquez never saw patients brought to the facility. Before anyone arrived, she was ordered to leave by the ship's head of security. When she reported for her shift the next morning, the surgical suite had been cleaned and restocked. No records indicated it had been used. The doctor was different after that night, Vasquez recalled. Nervous, drinking more than usual. He left the company a month later. This account aligned with the anonymous message about Deck B, but raised more questions than it answered. If medical preparations were made, someone expected injuries. If records were subsequently hidden, something happened that the cruise line wanted concealed. Sophie compiled this new information and took it to the FBI again, arguing that it constituted new evidence worthy of reopening the case. While agents agreed the information was intriguing, they explained that without concrete evidence of a crime, they couldn't justify the resources required for a full investigation. What Sophie needed was proof. Not theories, not suspicious patterns, but tangible evidence that something criminal had happened to her brother and sister-in-law. For 6 more years, that proof remained elusive, buried beneath the Caribbean waves, slowly being claimed by coral and time, waiting for a fisherman's line to pull it back into the light. Mateo Arce never intended to reopen a 14-year-old mystery. On April 8, 2025, he was simply trying to catch enough fish to cover his boat payment. At 52, Mateo knew the waters off Belize's coast better than most. He had been fishing commercially since he was 16, learning the migration patterns, the seasonal changes, the hidden reefs, and productive sandbars that tourists never found. That morning, he set out before dawn from his home village of Plasencia, navigating by memory through familiar channels. His destination was a reef system locals called the Garden, a reliable spot for grouper and snapper, the premium catches that restaurants paid top dollar to serve. He'd been fishing for about 3 hours, the morning sun now high enough to heat his shoulders through his faded t-shirt, when his line snagged on something that wasn't moving like a fish. It felt heavy, but dead, he later explained. Not fighting, just weight. Assuming he'd caught debris, perhaps a plastic container or waterlogged wood, he began the laborious process of retrieving his line. Whatever had snagged it was coming up gradually, revealing itself inch by inch. When it broke the surface, Mateo initially felt disappointed. Just garbage, as he'd suspected. A rectangular object, unrecognizable beneath a crust of barnacles and coral growth. He almost cut his line to avoid the trouble of cleaning it off his hook. Something made him hesitate. Curiosity, perhaps, or the instinct of someone who had spent his life reading subtle signs from the sea. Using his knife, he carefully scraped away the marine accumulation. Beneath the crust, black plastic emerged, then a logo, partially visible. Sony, a camera, a high-end digital camera, waterproof for underwater photography. Mateo had seen many such cameras over the years. Tourists brought them on snorkeling trips, eager to capture the vibrant reef life. Occasionally, they dropped them, the expensive devices disappearing into the blue depths, becoming part of the seabed's collected treasures. But this camera had been underwater much longer than most. The growth pattern suggested years, not months. Marine biologists would later analyze the coral formations and estimate the camera had been submerged for approximately 14 years. Mateo opened the battery compartment, finding it corroded beyond recovery. But the memory card slot, protected by rubber seals, showed promise. The small SD card inside appeared intact. "I have a son who works with computers," Mateo said. "I thought maybe he could see if anything was still on it." That evening, Mateo's son David inserted the card into his laptop. To both their surprise, the computer recognized it immediately, displaying a folder containing 78 photos and one video file. The photos told a story: a young couple on vacation enjoying the standard pleasures of a Caribbean cruise, breakfast on a balcony, tropical drinks by a pool, snorkeling excursions at various ports. They looked happy, David recalled. Normal tourists, nothing special. Until they reached the final images. The sequence changed abruptly. The last 5 photos weren't smiling vacation shots, but hurried, unclear images. A blurry picture of the ship's deck at night. A dimly lit corridor, the camera tilted at an odd angle. A close-up of a woman's face, her expression not smiling but urgent, her eyes wide. A partial view of a man in a white uniform, his face out of frame. And finally, a hand reaching toward the camera lens, the image cutting off as if the photo was taken accidentally during a struggle. The video file was corrupted, playing only in fragments, but what it showed was clear enough. The same woman from the photos, whispering urgently into the camera. Behind her, a ship's railing and the black ocean beyond. Only a few words were audible. "If anything happens to us," it was. Then static. Then nothing. David Arce had studied in the United States. He recognized an American accent when he heard one. Concerned by what they'd found, he suggested they contact authorities. "This doesn't look right," he told his father. "I think these people might have been in trouble." The next morning, Mateo brought the camera and memory card to the Belize Tourism Police in Plasencia. Officer Miguel Santos listened to his story, viewed the photos, and immediately recognized their potential significance. "I thought it might be evidence of a crime," Santos said. "And when I saw the cruise ship in the background of some photos, I remembered a case from years ago, an American couple who disappeared." Santos contacted the FBI's legal attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Belmopan. Within hours, federal agents arrived to retrieve the camera and interview Mateo about his discovery. The recovery location was carefully documented, approximately 18 nautical miles off the Belizean coast, in an area known locally as Deepwater Channel, a section of the Caribbean directly along the route the Ocean Aurora would have traveled in April 2011. The memory card was rushed to the FBI's Digital Evidence Laboratory in Quantico, Virginia. Technicians used specialized equipment to recover additional data from the corrupted video file. Their analysis revealed something the ARS's laptop couldn't process: embedded metadata showing exact times and GPS coordinates for each photo. The final images were taken between 11:55 p.m. and 12:04 a.m. on April 13 to 14, 2011, precisely when Evan and Marissa Lockwood disappeared. The GPS data placed these photos on Deck 9 of the Ocean Aurora, moving from the public area near the Starlight Lounge to a service corridor not accessible to passengers. Most significantly, the corrupted video file contained 9 additional seconds of footage beyond what David Ars had been able to view. In this segment, the camera appears to be struggling to focus in low light. A male voice, not Evan's, says clearly, "Turn that off. Give me the camera now." The voice belongs to someone speaking with authority, someone accustomed to giving orders. Forensic audio analysts compared this recording to public statements made by Ocean Aurora's officers in 2011. The match was unmistakable: Captain Roland Dyer. The final piece of evidence came from enhanced frames of the last photo. The partial image of a uniformed man initially showed only a torso and arm, but digital enhancement revealed a crucial detail on the sleeve: 3 gold stripes and the Aurora Cruise Line insignia, the rank marking of the ship's captain. 14 years after Evan and Marissa Lockwood vanished, Marissa's camera had surfaced with the answer to what happened that night. They had encountered Captain Roland Dyer in a restricted area of the ship, and whatever followed that encounter had been deliberate enough that someone tried to confiscate their camera. The FBI immediately reopened the case. Sophie Lockwood, now 35 and still living in Miami, received a call she had waited 14 years to get. "We found something," the agent told her. "You were right all along." The evidence recovered from Marissa's camera transformed a cold case into an active criminal investigation. Within weeks, the FBI assembled a task force dedicated to the Lockwood disappearance, combining maritime specialists, forensic analysts, and experienced homicide investigators. Their first step was to locate and interview everyone connected to the Ocean Aurora's April 2011 voyage. This proved challenging. 14 years had scattered the crew across the globe. Many had changed careers. Some had died. Others deliberately evaded contact. Roland Dyer, the ship's captain, had retired from Aurora Cruise Lines in 2015 with a generous pension. He purchased a villa in Costa Rica where he lived comfortably beyond the reach of routine extradition. When FBI agents attempted to interview him in May 2025, they found his property abandoned. Local authorities confirmed he had departed suddenly, leaving most possessions behind. Dyer's disappearance only strengthened suspicion against him. International arrest warrants were issued, and Interpol added him to their red notice list of globally wanted persons. Meanwhile, the investigation uncovered disturbing patterns in Dyer's history that had been concealed by Aurora Cruise Lines. Prior to commanding the Ocean Aurora, he had faced 3 separate allegations of inappropriate conduct toward female passengers. Each complaint had been settled privately, with accusers signing confidentiality agreements. More significantly, financial analysis revealed unexplained deposits to Dyer's accounts between 2009 and 2013. These payments, totaling over $850,000, came from offshore entities linked to Aurora Cruise Line's parent corporation. The company claimed these were performance bonuses, but no documentation supported this explanation. As investigators dug deeper, they encountered what Sophie Lockwood had faced for years: a corporate wall of silence. Aurora Cruise Lines maintained that any events aboard the Ocean Aurora in 2011 had been thoroughly investigated at the time and found to be accidental. They expressed sympathy for the Lockwood families but insisted they had no new information to offer. This position became untenable when the FBI obtained a search warrant for the company's archived records. In a secure storage facility in Jacksonville, Florida, agents discovered something extraordinary: the original, unedited security footage from Deck 9 on the night of April 13-14, 2011. This footage, which the company had claimed was lost due to technical malfunction, showed exactly what happened during the missing minute. At 11:59 p.m., Evan and Marissa step onto the outer deck. They appear to be arguing about something. Evan gestures toward the ship's interior, suggesting they should return inside. Marissa shakes her head, pointing her camera towards something off-screen. At 12:01 a.m. precisely, Captain Dyer enters the frame from the right. He approaches the couple, speaking to them. His demeanor appears professional but insistent. Marissa raises her camera, seemingly taking a photo of him. Dyer's body language changes instantly. He reaches for the camera. Evan steps between them. There's a struggle, brief but intense. Dyer pushes Evan against the railing. Marissa moves to intervene. Then all three disappear from frame, as if they've moved to another section of the deck. At 12:01 a.m., two security officers rush into view, looking around frantically. They speak into radios, then hurry in the direction where the three people had gone. The footage continues for another 15 minutes, showing various crew members arriving, conferring urgently, and eventually cordoning off the area. At 12:18 a.m., someone points a device directly at the camera, and the feed ends. This recovered footage provided visual confirmation of what the camera's photos suggested. Captain Dyer had confronted Evan and Marissa on Deck 9. Their interaction had escalated to physical contact, and immediately afterward, security personnel had responded to an incident. But the video didn't show what happened after the confrontation, whether the couple went overboard accidentally during the struggle, or whether something more deliberate occurred. This crucial gap left room for Aurora Cruise Lines to maintain their position that the Lockwoods' disappearance, while tragic, had been accidental. Then came another breakthrough. In June 2025, the FBI located Elena Vasquez, the former medical assistant who had spoken with Sophie years earlier. Now living in Chicago, Vasquez had left the cruise industry entirely, building a new life as a registered nurse. When agents approached her, she initially repeated what she had told Sophie. She had been ordered to prepare the medical suite on Deck B, then dismissed before any patients arrived. But when shown the recovered security footage and informed that she was no longer bound by her confidentiality agreement, which the FBI had determined was unenforceable in a criminal investigation, Vasquez revealed what she had withheld. "I didn't leave when they told me to," she admitted. "I hid in the supply closet. I knew something was wrong, and I was afraid to be involved." From her hiding place, Vasquez witnessed Captain Dyer and two security officers bring two people into the medical suite, a man and woman matching Evan and Marissa's descriptions. The man was unconscious, bleeding from a head wound. The woman was conscious but restrained, her arms held behind her by one of the officers. The captain was very upset, Vasquez recalled. He kept saying, "She has to delete those photos." The woman was crying, saying they just wanted to go to their cabin. According to Vasquez, the ship's doctor, Kenneth Morris, examined Evan and determined he had a severe concussion. He recommended immediate medical evacuation to a hospital. Dyer refused, insisting the situation needed to be handled on board. A heated argument followed between Dyer and Morris. The doctor warned that without proper treatment, the man's condition could deteriorate. Dyer remained adamant, ordering Morris to simply keep him stable. At this point, Marissa became increasingly distraught, threatening to report Dyer to the cruise line and authorities. She mentioned specific photos she had taken, saying they would prove everything. "The captain changed then," Vasquez said. "He became very calm, very cold. He told everyone to leave except the security chief. I was still hiding, so I stayed too. What Vasquez witnessed next horrified her so deeply that she had remained silent for 14 years. Dyer instructed the security chief to administer sedatives to both Evan and Marissa, claiming it was for their own safety. Once they were unconscious, he made a phone call, speaking cryptically about a situation that needed corporate guidance. After the call, Dyer ordered the security chief to move the couple to a maintenance room on Deck B. Vasquez remained hidden until everyone left, then fled the medical suite. She never saw Evan or Marissa again. The next morning, the ship's crew was informed that 2 passengers had gone missing, presumably falling overboard during the night. Everyone who had been involved in the Deck B incident was separately briefed by legal representatives from Aurora Cruise Lines. They told us we had seen nothing, Vasquez said, that if we ever spoke about it, we would be prosecuted for violating maritime law. They made it sound like we could go to prison. Vasquez's testimony, combined with the security footage and the recovered camera, created a clear narrative. What began as a confrontation on Deck 9 escalated into a medical emergency, which then transformed into something more sinister in the ship's restricted areas, but the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. In July 2025, as international authorities closed in on his location in Argentina, Roland Dyer died from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. In his villa, investigators found a typed letter addressed to his attorney. The document contained a partial confession. I never intended harm to come to the Lockwoods. What happened on Deck 9 was an accident. The young man lost his balance during our altercation and struck his head on a stanchion. I was trying to confiscate their camera because they had been taking photos in unauthorized areas of the ship. What followed was not my decision alone. Corporate directed that the situation be contained to prevent negative publicity. I was assured the couple would receive proper medical attention once transferred to another vessel offshore. I did not know until later that other plans had been implemented. I have carried this burden for 14 years. While I accept responsibility for my role in the initial incident, I cannot bear responsibility for decisions made above my authority level. The letter was signed and notarized, dated 3 days before Dyer's death. This document implicated not just Dyer, but Aurora Cruise Lines' corporate leadership in whatever happened to Evan and Marissa after they were sedated. It suggested a conspiracy extending beyond the ship to the highest levels of the company. Armed with this accumulation of evidence, federal prosecutors convened a grand jury in August 2025. After 2 weeks of testimony, indictments were issued against 7 individuals, including 3 former Aurora Cruise Lines executives, charged with conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering. The former security chief of the Ocean Aurora, charged with kidnapping, assault, and accessory to murder. 2 corporate attorneys, charged with obstruction of justice and witness tampering. The former ship's doctor, Kenneth Morris, charged with criminal negligence and accessory after the fact. The indictments alleged that Evan and Marissa Lockwood had been sedated, transferred to another vessel under the cover of darkness, and deliberately killed to prevent them from revealing compromising photographs they had taken aboard the Ocean Aurora. What those photographs might have shown remains speculative. Based on the direction Marissa was pointing her camera before Dyer intervened, investigators believe the couple may have witnessed illegal activity on a lower deck, possibly drug trafficking or smuggling, operations that sometimes use cruise ships as unwitting carriers. Whatever they saw or photographed, it was significant enough that multiple people conspired to silence them permanently. For Sophie Lockwood, the confirmation of her suspicions brought complicated emotions. I always knew something happened to them, she said, but knowing they suffered, that they were afraid and alone at the end, that's almost harder than not knowing. The recovery of Marissa's camera also provided unexpected insights into the couple's relationship. Among the photos were private moments capturing genuine affection. Evan sleeping peacefully on their balcony, Marissa laughing unself-consciously at a joke. The two of them reflected in a mirror, arms wrapped around each other. They really were in love, Sophie observed, studying these intimate glimpses. Whatever problems they might have, whatever tensions existed, underneath it all, they loved each other. That matters to me. For the parents of both Evan and Marissa, the reopened investigation brought renewed grief, but also validation. They had been right to question the cruise line's explanation. They had been right to suspect something more sinister than an accident. "We can finally mourn them properly," said Patricia Lockwood, "not as people who might be out there somewhere, but as children who were taken from us." In October 2025, a memorial service was held for Evan and Marissa in Portland. Hundreds attended, including Matteo Arce, who traveled from Belize at the Lockwood family's invitation. "Without you, we might never have known the truth," Patricia told him, embracing the fisherman whose simple act of curiosity had unraveled a 14-year conspiracy. Matteo, uncomfortable with being called a hero, insisted he had done nothing special. "The ocean decided it was time," he said simply. "I was just the one who pulled up the line." The Lockwood case exposed more than a singular crime. It revealed systemic failures in how cruise lines operate, how maritime incidents are investigated, and how corporations can evade accountability through jurisdictional complexity. In the aftermath of the indictments, Congress initiated hearings on cruise ship safety and oversight. Sophie Lockwood testified, alongside maritime safety experts and representatives from victims' advocacy groups. Her testimony was particularly powerful, documenting the 14-year struggle to uncover what happened to her brother and sister-in-law. "The system is designed to make families give up," she told the congressional panel. "Every obstacle exists to protect corporate interests, not to find truth or deliver justice." The hearings revealed alarming statistics. Between 2000 and 2025, more than 350 people had gone missing from cruise ships. In many cases, investigations were perfunctory, with cruise lines quickly declaring them accidents or suicides without substantive evidence. Most troubling was how cruise companies systematically insulated themselves from liability by registering ships in countries with minimal regulatory oversight, maintaining corporate headquarters in tax havens, and requiring passengers to sign away legal rights in their ticket contracts. They operated in a realm of limited accountability. "What happened to Evan and Marissa wasn't just a crime," said Representative Maria Sanchez, who chaired the hearings. "It was the predictable outcome of an industry that places profit above passenger safety." The cruise industry naturally disputed this characterization. The International Cruise Line Association issued statements emphasizing that millions of passengers cruise safely each year, and that incidents like the Lockwood case are extraordinarily rare. Yet the evidence presented during both the criminal proceedings and congressional hearings suggested otherwise. Internal documents from Aurora Cruise Lines revealed a pattern of concealing incidents, pressuring employees to maintain silence, and manipulating evidence to minimize liability. One email from a senior executive dated 2010 explicitly instructed ship captains to prioritize company interests when dealing with passenger situations that could generate negative publicity. Another document outlined protocols for managing witness statements following onboard incidents. These revelations fueled public outrage and industry reform. In December 2025, Congress passed the Cruise Passenger Protection Act, significantly expanding federal oversight of vessels that embark or disembark passengers at U.S. ports, regardless of their flag registration. Key provisions included mandatory reporting of all serious incidents, independent investigation requirements, enhanced security camera systems with tamper-proof storage, and the establishment of a public database tracking safety records of individual ships and cruise lines. For Aurora Cruise Lines, the consequences were immediate and severe. Their stock value plummeted as passengers canceled bookings and investors withdrew support. Class action lawsuits emerged from former passengers who had experienced other incidents aboard their ships. By early 2026, the company had filed for bankruptcy protection. The criminal cases against the indicted executives and crew members moved forward, with the first trial scheduled for March 2026. Prosecutors expressed confidence in their evidence, particularly with Vasquez's testimony and Dyer's partial confession establishing the foundation of the conspiracy. For the Lockwood and Kent families, no legal outcome could restore what they had lost, but the exposure of the truth provided a measure of closure that had been denied them for 14 years. "I used to dream that Evan was out there somewhere," Patricia Lockwood said. "Now I know he's not. That's painful, but at least it's real." Marissa's parents, David and Julia Kent, expressed similar sentiments. "We can finally stop wondering," Julia said. "We can finally say goodbye." Sophie Lockwood, whose relentless pursuit of the truth had been vindicated, found herself at a crossroads. After dedicating 14 years to uncovering what happened to her brother, she faced the question of what to do next. "For so long, this was my purpose," she said. "Now I need to find a way to make their story matter for others." She established the Lockwood Kent Foundation, dedicated to advocating for cruise ship safety reforms and supporting families whose loved ones disappear under mysterious circumstances. The organization provides legal resources, investigation assistance, and emotional support to those navigating the same confusing, often hostile system the Lockwoods had faced. Mateo Arce returned to his fishing boat off the coast of Belize, uncomfortable with the attention his discovery had generated. When offered reward money by the Lockwood family, he declined, saying only, "The sea gave me that camera for a reason. The money wasn't meant for me." He did, however, accept Sophie's invitation to join the Foundation's advisory board, providing perspective on how local communities and industries could help monitor corporate behavior on the seas they share. The ocean that had kept Marissa's camera safe for 14 years continues its eternal rhythm. Ships still cross its surface, carrying passengers who now have slightly more protection because of what happened to Evan and Marissa Lockwood. For Sophie, the knowledge that her brother and sister-in-law's tragedy has created meaningful change offers some consolation. "They didn't die for nothing," she said. "Their story will save others. That has to count for something." In the final analysis, what happened aboard the Ocean Aurora on April 14, 2011, wasn't just the story of two people who disappeared. It was the story of what happens when profit is valued above human life, when corporations become powerful enough to erase truth, and when systems designed to protect the powerful resist accountability at every turn. But it's also the story of how truth refuses to stay submerged forever. Sometimes it washes ashore. Sometimes it gets caught on a fishing line. Sometimes it emerges through the persistence of those who refuse to stop asking questions. The ocean remembers everything. And eventually, if we're willing to listen, it tells its secrets. In studying the Lockwood case, investigators identified 5 warning signs that, had they been recognized earlier, might have prevented tragedy or at least ensured accountability sooner. Evan and Marissa presented themselves as the ideal couple, always smiling, always camera ready. But those who looked closely noticed inconsistencies. Marissa's nervous phone call before the trip, Evan's uncharacteristic cash withdrawal, the subtle tension in their interactions. Perfect appearances often mask imperfect realities. When someone works too hard to seem flawless, they may be compensating for internal distress or external pressure. The 60-second gap in security footage was dismissed as technical failure. The missing crew records were attributed to clerical error. The ship's course correction was explained as routine navigation. Individually, each could be coincidental. Together, They formed a pattern that should have triggered deeper scrutiny. When systems designed to create accountability suddenly fail during critical moments, the failure itself becomes evidence. Crew members couldn't remember basic details about passengers they had served for days. Their accounts contradicted each other on fundamental points. Their statements contained identical phrases, as if rehearsed from a common script. Natural witness variation disappeared, replaced by unnatural consistency. This coordinated amnesia signaled orchestrated deception. When multiple people can't recall what they should remember, it's often because someone has told them forgetting is safer than remembering. The email supposedly from Evan, arriving at precisely the moment when investigation momentum was building. Its content designed to provide psychological closure while discouraging further questions. Its origin traceable to the very entity under suspicion. The timing and source of the message should have intensified scrutiny rather than diminishing it. When closure arrives too conveniently, wrapped in exactly the narrative that benefits those with the most to hide, it demands skepticism rather than acceptance. Marissa's camera, preserved by watertight seals, and the ocean's relatively stable deep environment, survived to tell its story. The memory card, designed to withstand extreme conditions, retained its data despite years underwater. Technology created to document joy unexpectedly documented something much darker. The very evidence that might have been destroyed instead became the key to unlocking the truth. Physical reality is stubborn. It leaves traces that even the most careful conspirators cannot fully erase. The truth doesn't stay buried. It waits to be discovered. These 5 warning signs appear not just in the Lockwood case, but in many situations where power conceals truth. They represent patterns that repeat across contexts, from corporate malfeasance to institutional abuse to political corruption. Recognizing them requires attentiveness to what doesn't align, the perfect smile that never reaches the eyes, the system that fails only at critical moments, the chorus that speaks in unnatural unison, the resolution that arrives too neatly, and the physical traces that refuse to disappear. Sophie Lockwood, reflecting on the 14 years spent searching for answers, offered this observation. The truth was always there, hidden in plain sight. We just needed to learn how to see it. For those who lost Evan and Marissa, that truth came too late. For others who might face similar situations, perhaps it will come in time. The ocean remembers, and eventually it speaks. The question is whether we're willing to listen.